Thank you very much for coming to this session. I see a lot of familiar faces, but for a couple folks that entered the room, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Ben Piscopo, and I'm a learning designer at edX. As I mentioned before, I'm pretty new at edX, so I appreciate your, just being a kind audience. I heard you're wonderful people, and I believe that. And definitely, feel free to ask your questions as we go along. Strike that. When we get to a certain point with questions, I'll make sure to move back and forth through the presentation to help you answer those. If you attended the last session, it was on assessments and how to provide a learning experience for credit-worthy courses, much like the courses that are being published in more frequency on edX.org these days with regard to MicroMasters and professional certificates. But in this session, we want to focus on the learner even more. Learner engagement, in particular, is extremely important in a MOOC. And you don't need me to mention that there are thousands and thousands, potentially, of students that could be in a MOOC, yet it can still feel pretty lonely. There are different types of components, different activities, learning experiences that we can provide to learners, including assessments, that provide more of this sense of community. And that's the focus of this session, as well as to talk a little about the updates to the edX platform that reinforce this, so that support this. Somewhat broadly speaking, community building, in this sense, we're going to talk about features related to cohorts, the ability to use cohorts in a way that's going to provide more of a community sense. Teams, in order to create even smaller groups that are self-selected. We're going to talk a little about peer instruction, as well as the use of content groups to help us toggle visibility within a course so that you can provide more specific messages to specific groups of learners. Again, I do recognize a lot of faces in here, but how about if you could please raise your hand and let me know that if you have created a course in edX before, or if you're part of a course team. Awesome. You're my audience, which is great. So we'll answer the question, why use cohorts? And predominantly, cohorts offer this ability to divide large groups of learners into smaller discussions. This is the case when you do have like tens of thousands of learners, but in any case, they can be really useful for this purpose. If you want to invite global learners into your course and not have to create another course for your blended students or students following another track, this can be really useful. We find that some partners who are creating a blended course experience for their on-campus students get a lot of great insight when they get to not only communicate with their own classmates, but also see what's going on in open discussions that might be course-wide for all learners, right? So there's the ability to create course-wide discussions as well as cohort-specific discussions. And then the free versus paid, which you might have experienced or seen on edX.org. Some of that functionality has been updated so that it doesn't completely rely on cohorts. It's another type of grouping mechanism, but for some time now, we've used cohorts in this way. So there are a couple ways to use cohorts. One is automatic versus manual. With automatic cohorts, it's suggested that before the course begins or the start date arrives, that you actually create cohorts in advance so that when learners enter the course, they'll be automatically sort of spread out into these different groups. Learners don't know that they're in cohort A, B, or C. They just experience course content the way that you've set it up. You can communicate with learners. That's an extremely important piece of developing a course, to make sure that learners know, if they need to, that they're a particular group or that they're being appreciated as a particular group. And as I mentioned, the free and paid option, which as a course author isn't something that I would set up, or perhaps we would set up, but perhaps part of your engineering team. As for manual cohorts, you can also use manual cohorts to split up discussions if you wanted to, but it does focus a bit more on content. And these are pretty similar, but different in situations in which you might want to use cohorts. I mentioned the first one already, but then also, let's say you've got a group of alumni, or if you're in an organization where people have continued to identify with your organization, or you have volunteers from different areas, you might want to provide one welcome message to this group, a video that has its visibility set for this group, and another video for another group. Also, there might be a situation in which you've got a science course, but there are some students that are learning about the implications of politics or legislation that is affected by this science. It might not be entirely what the course outcomes are expected for this course, but you can weave in some of this additional material for some added or augmented experience for those learners. Right, so those are situations when manual cohorts can be helpful. The cohorts put learners in a bucket, but in order for the content that's specific for those learners, and if you're using a content differentiation strategy, then you need to make sure that your content group configuration is also set. So there are settings within Studio that allow you to take a look and see which components you're using, and even unit and component name that are connected to a particular cohort group, right? As an author, you're going to author your course and set the visibility, but if you do want to look at a glance, it's extremely valuable to take a look at the content group configuration page. I mentioned in the last session this particular example that you can actually randomize assessments for different cohorts if this is a way that you want to go. Again, there's a lot of upfront time and effort that goes into, one, creating randomized assessments, and also providing those to audit learners, if we're going to take this example. But it's totally worth it in the end. So some notes on cohorts. The goal, I guess as a course author, you don't want to keep creating entirely new courses for different groups. You do want to have the same learning outcomes, generally the same learning outcomes within a course for all learners that participate in it. So which is why one limitation is that, it could be considered a limitation or not, is that you can set visibility only at that component level. So if you have a unit page, you're only setting visibility at that component. So if you do set that, some learners might see nothing in its place. So you have to take into consideration what other learners are going to experience when you start using cohorts. It might be obvious, but avoid making changes to cohorts and visibility of content while the course is running. Really, it's a lot of project management up front that will help you to make sure that your course experience is going to be sustained throughout the entire course life. And also, your cohorts are specific to the course area, whereas other pages that you can actually visit at the top are course-wide. So if you're using Teams, cohorts are not affecting that. If you're using a wiki, or if you're using some other pages, instructor information, syllabus, all of those other pages that you might create are visible to everybody. All right, so that's cohorts, extremely useful, especially for content differentiation and your discussions. But Teams is a feature that edX has created to provide a bit more of a social presence within a course. By default, there isn't a lot of, except for, of course, discussions, there isn't a lot of, hey, this is me, and this is my contribution to this group. Within teams, you can actually, as course authors, create the topics that you'll allow learners to create small groups within, right? And that can be super helpful when you want to provide sort of a 10-group limit, or 10-person limit, or 20-person limit to a conversation. It allows learners to communicate and work on group work. This is extremely important, but they might also want to create a Slack channel off of edX, or use other tools that are off of edX. But they got together within a team. An example would be Boston University's Spanish language course. So it's a language course, and you're learning Spanish, but the world doesn't just speak one Spanish, as I'm sure you're aware of. And there are different groups or different teams, team topics here that display different countries. So perhaps different slang that these countries use. If you're a student that wants to learn Argentinian Spanish, or practice with others, or create a small network of students that are interested in Argentinian Spanish, then you could do that here. It's important that you have a good reason to use Teams, rather than just sort of using it because it's there. There's a little bit of an aged example from McGill University in Canada, where they used Teams to create groups. They called it a group. And this was used to support social impact around different topics. Let's see here. I have an example from Demo X, which was recently updated. Continues to get attention. So in order to demonstrate Teams in Demo X, we also created a number of topics that students who are using edX.org might fall into these different categories and want to meet other people who are actually business students or data analysis or health students. They might have recommendations on other courses on edX, so when they come back to DemoX, they can share those with their smaller team. So just an example of how it can be used. An important note, though, like I said, don't just use Teams because it's there, right? You should have some sort of pedagogical reasoning for it. One partner, University of Pennsylvania, created a course called The Top 10 Social Issues for the First 100 Days. First 100 days of what? Yeah, the new president. Okay, we won't go down that road. But it was a course to get learners to talk about social issues that matter, especially ones that might matter to them individually, that are personal to them. But you'll notice that there's no team page here, and that's because they chose to simply use discussions within the course. You can see this sort of welcome week or section, but then all of their topics are listed down below here. In a pretty decent format as well. They organize the content. I can even open one up for you. So urban food deserts in particular. They introduce this issue. They have an interview with an expert, in this case on food deserts, which is the lack of access to good quality, nutritious food in urban areas. They also provide a very interesting animated version of sort of a typical day in someone's life who might live in an urban food desert, as well as a quick check for understanding. We understand the value of providing this regularly. And updates from the media. Actually, this particular course team pulled in articles discussing this issue, and also very timely. You could, like the most recent one was April 27th. The 100-day mark has passed, in case you don't follow American politics. And so this course sort of came to its sort of natural end of update, although there's still a lot of activity in this particular course with their discussion down below. So rather than having teams in small groups discussing this particular topic, it is a full discussion with learners from all over the world that can use the features of the discussion, the inline discussion. Yes? Actually, I think well, how about I come to the end of use the last example, and then we'll go into Q&A. I lied, I'm sorry, when I said that you can ask questions at any time. Blame me. All right. Okay. I've provided these considerations in a handout as well. You find it on the schedule website. But for the most part, I've covered these points. As always, make sure that you're communicating clearly with your learners that, hey, this is another page outside of the course page area. So make sure that you provide a link or directions on how a learner can access it. The last one that I want to talk about is actually an assessment. So within this assessment, it is peer instruction popularized by Eric Mazur's work at Harvard in the 1990s. Right? So you might be familiar with sort of the research on peer learning. So peer learning or peer instruction actually has a component, an advanced component that you can enable in your course. It was graciously provided by the University of British Columbia. So in your advanced settings, if you're familiar with this area, it's this UBCPI advanced setting. Right, the focus of peer instruction is to provide an engaging experience for learners to learn from each other. An important aspect of peer instruction is that you want to help learners clear up any gray areas in their learning, right? This might not be the best tool to use if you want to ask a very clear-cut and dry type of question. You might want learners to help provide an answer, their rationale for the type of answer that they've given. It looks like this. So if you've seen or used clickers in the classroom, they tend to support the use of a poll or creating a poll, multiple choice question, which you can introduce in numerous ways. But essentially, learners would pick an answer, write up why they think this, submit it, and then they would reflect on their peers. You can actually choose how many different peer answers to this question you want to show in front of a particular learner. When they take a look at other learners' rationale and reasons for choosing an answer, some answers are the same and some might be different. Then the learner gets another opportunity to answer the same question. And by doing that, perhaps they pick another answer, or they double down and they just pick the same answer again. It's quite possible. Either way, when they get to the end, they get to compare. And so they're provided with this original answer, sort of the outcome of what learners in the course picked first, as well as the revised answer. In this particular example, you can see that quite a few learners learned successfully from their peers, assuming that the question was worded correctly and carefully and fairly. That's an important one. If you want to try this yourself, there's a great example, an interesting example from UBC that involves dogs and their personalities to some degree, determining just by the face or the look of a dog whether they're scared or angry or they have anxiety. So it's a very interesting peer instruction example. I encourage you to try it on DemoX. There's also an example from UBC themselves where they took peer instruction and used it as an interactive poll, right? I encourage you to be creative with the naming of the use of these tools. It doesn't have to be peer instruction. It can be done in many other ways. So in this particular situation, a learner gets to choose a certain design style for a city. They're presented with sort of the kind of city that they want to make a design for to make it more ecologically friendly to live in, and then learners are sort of explaining their rationale behind their choice. Same thing with Query 101X from the University of Queensland. In their particular example, they are actually using it as a knowledge check. It's very useful as a formative assessment, and really what's underlining this entire thing is this feeling that I'm not alone in this MOOC. I've got classmates that I can help and who can also inform me. So, quite a useful tool indeed. Just a few notes, considerations when using peer instruction. You only award points for doing it, right? So you award a number of points for getting to the end. If they get the wrong answer, that's not really the point of it. They will at the end see what the correct answer is. And if they were stubborn and didn't change their answer and they still got it wrong, that might also be impactful enough, cause enough friction and create a even better memory for the learner, right? So very useful for formative purposes. You can select what to display to learners, as in you can pick random answers that other learners have made, potentially all the same, or you can pick simple, which pulls in one answer from each of the multiple choice options with learners' rationales for each of those. Okay, so that's during step 2 of peer instruction. Make sure to test it out and see how clear your learning gains are. As with any assessment, it really should be a fair and honest and clear question, right? And as always, you can use the insight tools within Studio to take a look and see which of your assessments in your course learners have gotten more often correct or heavily incorrect, and it's worth taking another look at those assessments. All right, so those are my samples and examples for supporting learner engagement. I hope that you can find those and more ways, perhaps off-platform, that can increase learner engagement and build a community. So, thank you. And I'll take some questions since we have. How are we at time? We're still good. Cool. All right.
Yeah. Thank you for a great presentation.
Thanks.
And so great that you highlight peer instruction. I'm really fond of it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's a really cool tool. I love it too.
Yeah, I think like you can like combine assessment with learning, so like kind of formative assessment. So you learn doing the assessment. That's great. I have a question regarding cohorts and teams. If
Yes.
there's like any depending on which cohort you are part of, it also like has an influence on the team that you see, and then depending on the team, also like the peer instruction and the peer assessment.
They're completely separate. So the team page is an experience all learners have. They'll see it the same way, but they'll self-select their own small team, really. So cohorts are only applicable to the rest of the course area itself. So you click back into the course page, and then it would take effect.
Thanks.
Yep. Another question at the back, and ask it once you get the microphone, please.
Are you aware of a functionality that would allow the course team to see all the responses of an Aura similar to like a Google form? Or do I have to generate server logs and reports every time I would like to check? Because I would like to just make like a buzzword search to see what are my students responding to the most, even in an open text response assignment.
You're saying in Auras specifically?
Yes, in Auras.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the platform still sort of requires you to generate a report, which would spit out an Excel spreadsheet or something like maybe a CSV file or something, yeah. So once that comes out, you could then run a search within Excel or whatever spreadsheet program you're using for certain terms, but it's still a bit of a manual process to do more of the, submission by submission type of analysis that you're looking to do. So, and I do want to mention, while ORAs are super helpful to scale this sort of open response experience for learners all over the world, it is just that. You may have thousands, hundreds or thousands and tens of thousands of learners, and there's simply, I don't want to say there's no reason to look at individual learners' responses, but it's just not the kind of activity that our product team might focus on, at least in the very near future. What we do have that can help you with analyzing individual learners' behaviors is the learner page within Insights. And you can actually take a look at who's participating in discussions more, who's watching videos, who's answering questions and assessments, which can give you, and that's connected to a username. So you can find your all-stars in that way, but in terms of looking deep into their specific answers across perhaps thousands of submissions, that's really the only way to do it. Thanks for the question. Take the question over here, and here comes the microphone.
I've got two questions. Concerning the teams, is there any way for a team together to answer a question, an assessment?
An assessment.
And if that's true, is there any way to compare an individual assessment with a team assessment?
At the moment, Teams does not support like an assessment piece where you can actually pull a grade from it. I've heard this question before from partner course teams. It would be wonderful if you could create sort of a group project experience within Teams. So something that I'll take back to our product team. But unfortunately, at the moment, you can't do grading within Teams. I hope that answers both your questions.
Just following on this question, I'd be very much interested if, as a student, I could invite another peer to be part of my team. I may also belong to a larger group. And what would be very interesting is for me to be able to see my own results and see the results of my team as well as my group.
Like assessment results or other?
Yeah, my own assessment results, my assessment compared to my team as well as to the larger group.
This is a great question, and it certainly would allow a learner to be more aware of their surroundings and how other learners are performing. This is I think the type of thing that's in discovery at the moment for our product team, the idea that you can actually see how you're doing within a course. I don't know if it's something that is coming soon. But it would be valuable. The short answer is no, that's not possible at the moment in the platform.
Today at Unisex, I don't want to take too much time, but what we do is we've introduced the fact that you can view your own results. And what we've observed is it helps students. They ask us, hey, I've spent that much time, and it displays that I spent a little less. There must be a problem, you know? And we're like, yeah, anyway, we're just here to help you. It shouldn't be a big deal. But it does help. And instead of forcing them to spend too much time, just the fact that you display the results it does help them. And we would wish to put them in, not to compare only the group, we do that. They see their own results, they see the results of the group, they see the average, but we'd like them to fight together in small peers, I mean in small teams, and that would be very great if they could do that by not forcing them to be part of a team, but by inviting others to join their team. So I think it goes the right way, but I hope I could do that as well.
No, it's a very good comment. Would be a wonderful experience, I think so too. And I can note that we will continue to make updates to like the social aspect of learning on edX in the near future. Thank you for your question. I think we have time for another one or two. Yeah, up front here.
Yeah, just like I'm quite curious about like now say like you are going to have like a focus on social learning. Is there anything in pipeline that you can reveal?
I don't know what I could say publicly on this. We do have a guest from product who could comment if you I don't know what kind of answer you have. If you want the mic, yeah.
That's the first part of your question. Anything specific?
Social learning updates that might be coming down the pipeline.
Like peer coaching, peer assessment, like.
So one thing I can say, so it actually relates more to the last question, but I think it's tied to your question too, the notion of being able to compare performance. We're looking at not necessarily grade type performance, but time on task performance. Actually some very interesting work that came out of Delft recently looking at this. I see you, Udo. And those results look very promising. What we've seen in terms of testing of comparing grade performance, although I love the idea of making it by invitation, maybe that's a way around it, but the impact on the learner of making the course competitive at the grade level varies significantly from learner to learner, and in some cases it's strongly negative. So it's something that we're going to look at testing further. I can say that generally our theme in 2018, above all, is learner engagement. That's the thing that we're looking at, and social is going to play a significant role in that. We've set up one team in particular, just spinning up just now, that's going to be focused on rapid experimentation in the space of learner engagement within the course. So there's certainly going to be, hopefully, a lot more to come in the next few months on this topic.
Great. That's great news.
I'm
Thank
Ian,
you.
by the
Thank
way.
you, Ian. I appreciate it. Getting pretty close on time? Okay. I
Thank
think
you.
this will be our last question. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's just a quick question. Do you have some plan to merge teams and discussion? Because it looks to be kind of redundant because you have a space for discussion in Teams and another discussion space. By the way, the number of posts are not reported from Teams to, if you look at participants, you look only you will have only the total of posts in discussion, but not the one he posted in Teams. So I was wondering if you have any plans to merge those two elements to have one single customized element.
It's an important observation, I would say, if you wanted to answer that. Sure. Ian from Product, ladies and gentlemen.
So it's a good point about Teams. When I look at Teams, I essentially see a small private discussion forum. I would actually prefer, and this is not something that's actively in the works, but we're at least at the discussion stage, is to make Teams a more fully featured capability with, for example, a co-working, even at the assessment level, for example, team project. I like to think of Teams as becoming something along the lines of a study group rather than simply a place for discussion. But I think the discussion would stay within that, the team capability.
Great. Thank you very much for the question and answer. So thank you very much for coming, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.